Welcome to Arts Dynamics Talks. I am Sofie Marin, founder and CEO of Arts Dynamics, and we are an arts entrepreneurship education company and a learning network for creative entrepreneurs around the world. And we are super passionate about empowering creators with all the strategies, tools, and connections needed to help them digitize, future-proof, grow, and scale their artistic businesses, brands, and impact. And every week I have the great honor of speaking with a leading change maker in the cultural and creative fields to listen in and to learn what they are doing right now that's working, maybe not working, what they are doing to thrive in rather changing and some would even say turbulent times. And today is no exception. I am so honored and so happy to invite my dear friend Alfons Karabuda to the talk today. And Alfons, I will make a short introduction, but first I just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure.
Indeed, it is. I agree wholeheartedly. And you are a composer, you are a cultural rights advocate, and you hold several leading positions within the music industry and in the cultural sphere as well, including president of SCOP, honorary president of ESCA, European Songwriters, and let's make sure I say this correctly now, Composers and Songwriters Alliance, and also Polar Music Prize. You're the founder of the Node Stockholm, and you do so many different things, and including you're also involved with the Global Music Vault, and you're helping us to actually protect music for coming generations. I mean, your bio is so long, and I would just love for you to share a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what led you to be where you are today. So over to you, Alfons.
Thank you so much. And I know it can seem as if I hold many positions, which I do, but they're all basically, they all come from the same perspective, from an author's perspective and from an urge of contributing to something in the arts that would be not only prosperous, but also sustainable. So to me, it's not that strange being on many platforms and organizations, because it's all about connecting the dots. And when you connect the dots, you'll understand more and you can transmit more, because we tend to work in silos in music, in culture, and in society. And by doing so, we kind of lose perspective and think that we are part of the only truth and the only value. But it's when we start connecting with other values that we get that added value necessary also to, especially now, maybe moving into the future.
For sure, for sure. And you've got a rather fascinating background. I remember when you told me about your family and your upbringing, you traveled a lot, you lived in many places around the world. Please share a little bit more for those that might not know you that well.
Absolutely. So my parents were journalists and filmmakers. They were also correspondents for national TV and media in Sweden. So we lived in several countries, lived several years in Santiago de Chile. They had all of Latin America as their field. They were correspondents in Paris. We've been to several countries in Africa. So sometimes I got a first impression of countries in a way that you usually maybe don't. I remember when I was very small, we were in Guinea-Bissau, and we were friends. My parents were friends with the president, Luis Cabral, and Luis, the president, was going on a trip around the country to greet the people. And I didn't really understand that. I thought it was me they were greeting. So this little child and everyone waving to me, I felt that these are the most friendly people that I've ever seen. So yes, we've had a special upbringing, and an upbringing that also showed that basically anything is possible. That a single person, and maybe especially in the field of culture, can do things that you didn't think were possible, and you could get support and give strength into a whole society. But I also saw that these people having this ability were also sometimes seen upon from a government as dangerous, and they had to pay a very very high price, sometimes with their own life. So
Mm.
this also made me realize the importance, the strength of culture, but also the importance of freedom of speech, of artistic rights. And that was the start for me getting into this kind of advocacy that I've been working with and on for many years now.
And when did you start composing?
I started very early. I started with an old piano from my grandmother in the hallway, and my uncle Christer Gidlund. He was a book publisher actually, as my grandfather also, Alfons Karabuda. Uh, but he was a great musician as well, and he showed me what was possible with the piano, and I started playing. And when sitting there in the hallway, I used to hear what was on the TV, and I started to try to play the same tunes that were on TV. And after a while, I tried composing my own, seeing how they would fit to what I saw on the TV. So it started very early with that, and I've been working as a composer for theater, film, and TV, and I specialize, I would say, unintentionally in depressing music.
Oh, why is that, do you think?
I have no idea. Probably it just comes natural. Maybe it's because it makes me happy.
Oh, I see, I see. And you just released music just a few days ago, film music, but you without a film.
Yes, small pieces called scores without the movie.
Mm.
Also, because I don't have time to work with big productions, but also I thought it would be fun just to use. I've used it myself with my phone. I shot a few videos, and I used the small music pieces to create something that is not really maybe a blockbuster movie or so, but it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mentioned Dogma when you and I had the conversation prior
Yeah,
to this. It's like the Dogma movie, and you create your own movie and your own music.
exactly. Well, maybe I was inspired. I did compose for a film for Centropa as well.
Well, there you
It's
have it.
yeah, exactly.
That's so fantastic. I just want to do a shout out as well. I see Stockholm Music City says we're all watching via our community here, Alfons and Sophie. So I just want to say hi and thank you
Okay.
so much
Hi.
for tuning in. We got several people tuning in both live and also watching our replays, which is fantastic. We so
Great.
appreciate it. And if you do have any questions as well for this talk today, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll see if we have some time to bring them up. But Alfons, prior to this conversation today, I think let's start there with you being a composer and you writing music, but also, as you said, you are now in several leadership positions. You're able to also make an impact as a change maker from in that role. And I had a conversation the other day with someone who said, "Can you please ask Alfons? You know, for us who are up and coming, we might be women or non-binary, and how do we make sure we get our voices heard? How do we make sure that we are being listened to?" And people in position or gatekeepers, they might not, they felt that maybe they weren't always understood because maybe sometimes gatekeepers and people in leadership positions might not have an understanding of the music industry, whereas or arts and culture in general, as a creator. But here you are and you do. So what would be your advice for someone who asks that?
It's a very good question, and it's always a difficult one because we are in a field where it's always difficult. It's difficult for anyone to sustainably work as a professional, but it has been and become even more excluding, not because we have chairpersons or presidents or board members working, because often they actually work on your behalf. It's, I would say, more of the digital sphere. And you know, Sophie, that I am very much pro technology and the future. We'll get back to that. But in the online field, we don't have public spaces. We have very few and very strong actors in this, platforms, services that decide what is actually given access to a real audience. Because just being there among the billion songs does not give you an audience. And I think that this is something that we need to address, and we need to change this. And we actually do that. And when I say we, in this case, it's SCAP, the Swedish composers and songwriters and lyricists, but also a tech company called New Internet Media, and the biggest network of music organizations and institutions in the world, the International Music Council. I was president until November last year. And what we are doing there, we now have an EU project called the Fair Music Project, where we are not only studying, but we're actually concretely building a platform and showing how technology can be an enabler also for decentralized streaming services, how you can highlight music that otherwise is not accessible. And you can do this in many ways. You can give power to listeners or creators and performers over a platform and the playlists. And you can also use technology, like we're working with a company called Utopia Music, looking at how you can scan and promote, maybe even positively discriminate in lifting the music that actually needs the extra push. That could be a regional repertoire. Maybe it would be raising for composers and performers that are not male and not as visible. There are many different ways of pushing and using technology as that push. And this is something that we're actually working and actively working with now. We have 6 months where SCAP is the leader of that process, where we have stakeholder consultations, looking at what the needs actually are and what kind of obstacles we need to get over in order to reach a result. So from grassroots level, not having a president or chairperson like me thinking that I know what is needed. It has more to do with dialogue and knowing who to talk to. And this we do every day.
I know we both share an interest and a passion for music, arts, and tech. And this is a perfect example of where technology, as you said, can enable positive change, not only from a gender perspective, but I would imagine also from various musical expressions who might not be seen as commercial. Or can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, first of all, technology in this case, I think we need to address it also from different aspects. We started out talking a bit about the importance of artistic freedom and freedom of speech. And technology is great, but the fact that you actually could reach out to much more fans and people than was possible before increases also the way you might be vulnerable in a country that would not be as democratic, for example. So this has also led to a negative spiral and heavier situations for many of our colleagues, where we need to actively work to help them strengthen their cases. And this can be done in many ways, by, of course, having stronger individual rights. But in countries where the rights are not respected, you might need to have a safe haven. And SCAP was one of those working hard in Sweden in creating safe havens, not only for writers, but also for musicians and composers. So we need to look at creativity in a way that is not nationalistic, but in a way how we globally can safeguard and promote the right to express yourself. And not only express yourself, you actually have the right to be heard. So this, once again, you get back to the streaming services. Yeah. If you express yourself and no one hears you, that is not really the freedom of expression.
Yeah. And I know we've had several conversations around this topic. It's one thing, as you said, to distribute or to push your music out in the world, but if no one is there to actually receive it and to hold the space for it, what does it matter? So from a decentralization point of view, we hear that also not only in music, but in arts and culture as well. We see more and more, we see that we are going more and more in that direction. And I mean, with blockchain, with Web3, and with really creator-led communities, and they create their own economies. For someone who might not live in a country where it's, you know, as open as it is right now, at least in Sweden, what should they do? How could they go about, you know, how could they find solutions for them if it's not there present in their everyday where they are based, if that makes sense?
Well, you can see that, of course, with the importance of also sometimes being anonymous. I've had on several boards on global organizations that if we wouldn't have had, you know, VPN tunnels, they wouldn't have been able to take part of any board meeting. And it's the same thing when it comes to music. I think you need to have safe and hopefully decentralized possibilities of reaching out can also make it safer with who your audience actually is as well. So there are a lot of interesting ways of doing that, but foremost, I have to say that we look at that as extreme examples. I think that in countries where we at least have regulations, we have a copyright or author's rights, we need to make sure that our cultural rights are fit for purpose and that we also have a technology that can safeguard and promote them. And this can be done in many ways. We are now working with registration of copyright, for example, which is very interesting because, well, when you hear registration of copyright, well, do you need to register copyright? No, not really, because as soon as you have created something that is original, you have the copyright. But the problem is that in a new landscape and a new technological landscape, you also need technical tools that are more advanced and modernized in order to actually safeguard and also make use of your copyright in a more efficient way business-wise. So if you register your copyright as a DAO and you have it as a small automated limited company, every song would have the same rights as a small company, and you could also make use out of your shares where you don't really necessarily need to sell them, because I'm not a fan of selling your rights, but you could lease them for a few years. You can collaborate with others investing in your music for a limited time. And there are many ways of using this. So this is something that we're working on now with something called the Copyright Guard as well. So new solutions to old problems, but old problems having become more, I wouldn't say dangerous, but serious because of the development that we see in technology and innovation. But to me, innovation and technology is what saves us all and gives us the possibility of being stronger as individuals. And that, I think, is the key for a vibrant musical and cultural life.
I agree wholeheartedly. And for those that don't know what DAO is, can you please explain that?
Well, very simply, I would just say that you can look upon it as an automated company where you have, through NFT and blockchain technology, you can have the right to vote. You can have everything is set up in something called a smart contract. So basically what you have in an organization where you have statues, so that is all set automated, where you in a simple way can use your voting right or your tokens in a way to make your decisions and also actually get your money into the right wallet. It would be a digital wallet, but everything is digital right now, isn't it?
Yeah, more and more so. And I love that you bring this up, because we've had conversations about this in previous talks. We also host Arts Dynamics Entrepreneur Meetups, where we look into future trends. And we've talked a lot about NFTs, digital art, generative AI. And for those of you who are in our community, you can go back and find more information about that on our various platforms. But one thing we talk about is, as a creator, it's not either or. And I hear you say that too. You can create something in the physical realm or a hybrid version. You can add a digital layer or an immersive layer, or vice versa. You create something in the immersive world like you're talking about here, and then you bring that into the physical world. So as a creator, just a piece of advice, if you haven't thought about this for your strategy, just think about whatever you're creating, whether it is music or anything else, how can you look into various ways of syndicating that creation so that you can spread it across several platforms, reach several audiences. And what you said right now, Alfons, as well, it just also makes me remember during several of the meetups we've actually had investors there, both there in the rooms, and also creators who've told us that they have been approached by investors who've asked them if they have NFTs, if they can offer a digital immersive version of their creation. And I think for many creators, they don't even think about this as an opportunity to generate an income. But as a matter of fact, and you were saying that too, that there seems to be a trend that you're seeing.
Oh yes,
yeah?
definitely. And you will see the album that you talked about, my latest. You will see NFTs, and you will have everything, every song and video available also, and also registered, as I said, as a DAO as well. So we're trying to show it also by example, that this is not just, these are not just dreams, or you showing by example how it concretely can be used. So yes.
Yeah, and how do you combine that then with collecting rights societies and tracking your rights, but also having how does that work together, or does it?
It works. It's not a conflict at all. When you say register, people would ask me, but I've registered with my collecting society. No, you haven't. It's not the copyright that is registered. You registered your song, so the collecting society can follow and administer and monitor, and this is great. This is something that they should continue with. The registration that I talk about is something you could, when I was teenager, they used to tell me, if you want to safeguard your music, you record it on a cassette. You'll have to explain afterwards what a cassette is, and and then you put it in an envelope. I think people know still what envelopes are, and you close it and send it recommended to yourself. So it's closed. There you have your music. There you can use it if you end up in a legal process and show that you actually wrote the music. So basically, you could say that this is a new version of that, but also so much more usable in also in business. So it's not just the registration. So it's not a conflict, because back then that was what you did while you still had your music and a collecting society. So so these are not either or. It's a way of using your music. But then I think that the collective rights management system, which I like, because this is a system where we as creators, we are part of governance. We own our societies together with the publishers, but they need to step up. And I know that many of them are working on that, but they need to step up in order not to be, not to have competition winning over them from what otherwise could be disruptors, instead of actors and stakeholders adding a value to a system and an industry that needs to be sustainable. We don't need different stakeholders fighting about and of our values. So because usually we end up as creators and performers without the value in the end.
Yeah. And just to ask you one technical question, because again, in our community, we've got people who have no experience whatsoever in NFTs or blockchain, or they hardly understand what we're talking about. And then there are others that are so very much at the very forefront of it all. And when they share, what they're up to, and even what you're talking about here is like, wow, we didn't even know that existed. But for someone who's just starting out, what would be your recommendation? Where should they go if they wanted to try these things out? First, you mentioned a platform where they can go find more more information. So we'll make sure we post a link to that in the show notes. But also for someone who wants to do what you do, you've just released music, you created these digital, add-ons for that music. Well, how do people do it? What is a wallet? How do they create one? How do they create their NFTs? Where would they start?
I think it would be unfair to say that it's so easy and I just did everything by myself. I've had the fortune of working together with, for example, New Internet Media, with its founder, Tor Pettersson. And I know that together now we are going to make all of this accessible and easy for people to use through the Fair Music platform, which is not a company. It's, as I said, an EU project aiming to facilitate. So there you will get this soon. But I will actually have a talk with New Internet Media to see if we can add this information through you, so any listener could actually get an easy explanation on the first steps to be taken. And I know that they will help with this, because they also do it for the right reasons. They want to make this possible. So let's have that as a nice bonus afterwards, where you will be able to send links to those interested.
Wow, that is amazing. Thank you. That sounds great. Because I know the reason I'm asking is I always get questions after these talks. And
Yes,
how do we do it? Where do we go? Can we contact the guest? Where do
Yeah.
we find more information? So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And speaking of freedom of speech and speaking of new technology, and we've touched upon it already, with artificial intelligence and with all these platforms, because obviously AI is at the very, it's what's driving it a lot. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, with the rise of AI, we are getting closer to it becoming sentient. We're just getting closer to it, being so super smart. And we can also see now with various like ChatGPT and other platforms where some say it's even becoming too woke, if there is such a thing. That you have, it's censoring you already. The AI is censoring what you can say and do. And even when you put in data about different people, AI will answer differently. Without getting too political about it, I would love to hear your take as a creator, as a leader in your field. Speaking of artistic freedom, freedom of speech, AI, new technology, especially also since artists and creators are very much breaking new grounds and are maybe the truth sayers in society. What are the opportunities, but what are also the threats that you see? A big question, but I'd love to hear what you think.
It's a big question. And first of all, we all know AI, so many things. And most of us working with music use AI in so many ways.
Yeah.
Not always generative AI and not always to compose, but as tools, making the recordings better quality, and having AI as a democratization tool, making it possible for more people to record in a professional way. So that's obviously something very positive. One negative thing, and something that we as creators have been working against and trying to improve, is transparency. We've been working against the lack of transparency in the music industry, and we've been fairly successful with the new copyright directive, but we have difficulties with some of the technology that is still used by collecting societies, where you are not linked to your listener also when it comes to payment through what's called user-centric models, etc. When it comes to AI, we're going in the opposite direction. We have non-transparency because we are not really sure of what is put in the AI box, and therefore we are not sure how to evaluate what comes out of it. This is difficult, of course, when using copyright material. So this is one part that is difficult. And I think that when we see some of the results of AI, it's almost a bit too good. So it's when I say too good, the quality doesn't really affect me. Sometimes it's like you don't see the flaws. And that is one part. One other dangerous part is that we tend to strengthen some of the prejudice that we have. We are putting them into AI, and what comes out of there, as you say, is almost even clearer, that you see who actually put their values into the AI box. You don't have the diversity there. So I think that you need to have not a regulation that kind of reduces the capacity for creative people with AI, but you need to monitor and evaluate AI algorithm to ensure that they are producing ethical content. That is not through censorship. That can be done through actually having a dialogue with the cultural sphere. Something that I always said also when it comes to innovating new solutions or products for the cultural sphere, do it together with the creators and performers. That's when you know that your products are also fit for purpose and that they actually are what we need. This is not the way we have created streaming services, and this is why not everyone, I'm trying to keep it positive, not everyone is totally satisfied with the streaming services, the result that they give, and especially not the remuneration. So I think that when it comes to AI, we need to incorporate that kind of feedback already from the start. And in a way, we're already late. I don't want to say too late, because we need to actively kind of force ourselves to work together, because I think that will also be better for the actual developers of AI and other technical solutions as well.
Yeah, and I've heard lately that there is an increased demand that creators add information, and explaining and are being transparent about the fact that they've actually used AI in their creation, whether it is book authors or anyone really working within the creative field, is a film, anywhere, music as well, of course, where they more and more they are being asked to be transparent. Have you used AI in the creation of this? So that's one thing, and I see that more and more. So for those of you, and I know we've got book authors in this community, and people are thinking about writing books, just be careful and just know that this is coming up, and you might be asked to show what you've done. But I've also heard the opposite problem the other day, and it made me a little bit gobsmacked, and I'd like to run it by you, Alfons, to see what you think. I spoke to an artist who has an upcoming exhibition, and this person had created work for this exhibition, including written content explaining about this person's work. The person or the organization who brought this person in to host this exhibition then changed the wordings of this artist in a more sort of AI generated way, so that it would be quote unquote readable for young people up until you're very old. That was sort of the reasoning, that it had to be it doesn't matter what age group you are, you're supposed to be able to understand the writing, something like that. What I am hearing when I hear that is that is actually interference with your artistic freedom. And speaking of freedom of speech, I mean, if you are as a creator, you create something, and then you have someone at a local local level, regional level, or even in a municipality, they come in and they actually change your wordings using AI. Isn't that a little bit of a dangerous territory to sort of walk into, an arm length and all of that?
Absolutely. And in a way, this is already a problem before AI. So it's just the fact that with AI, more people will try it, and more people you will have more examples because it's easier to do. But as with copyright or author's rights, as we say in most of the countries in Europe, except the UK does not have the same strong security for the moral rights, because authors' rights are economic rights and moral rights. And the moral rights is the right for you to always be credited, so everyone knows that you are connected with the work that has been created, but also the fact that it cannot be used in ways that to you would be wrong, that they could be used. For example, I usually use it as an example when they use maybe in party politics, where they have they use it in a campaign for a political party, and it's not the party that you feel is appropriate for them to use your music. So this, what you explain here, is in a way the same thing. By changing that, you change, maybe to you it would be such a significant change that it's not the same piece, it's not the same text anymore. So that is something that has to be done together with the creator, of course. As long as this, we're talking about texts and we're talking about art. If it's just a manual for an appliance somewhere, I'm sure you can try to make it easier to read. Actually, I think that would be good sometimes.
That is true, but well, this is a different thing. Is one is for maybe for the marketing material or for a website, but another thing, if you're actually creating something that you want to showcase, and then the other party that you're working with is suddenly using AI, say, to change those wordings, or even, you know, imagine someone would do that with your music, to come in and change your music to make sure it fits a little bit better with whatever they want. Otherwise, that wouldn't be.
No, but that, once again, it's not really an AI question. This is a matter of copyright and author's rights. So that is not, it's not allowed actually to do so. So that's simple. So it's just there, the AI will only be a tool to.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, if for those of you watching, please feel free to drop a comment below. Thank you. I mean, Alfons, this is such a fascinating conversation we're having. I'd love to hear people, if you have any comments or feedback or takeaways already, please, both during the live session, but of course also if you're watching the replay or listening on podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you find this podcast afterwards. Let's shift gear a little bit. Alfons, since you are a creator and you have this perspective, what would you say, you know, looking towards the future and the future of monetization of what we do, especially maybe with a focus on the music industry, but also the creative industry as a whole? What do you see around the corner? How can we monetize? You mentioned the streaming platforms before, and we know that it's rather hard or difficult to monetize sometimes those kinds of platforms. But what would be your advice? I'm giving you many questions now again, sorry. So first of all, future trends when it comes to monetization, and maybe also advice to creators how they can think about these things.
There are several things, and there are actually already tools available to counter, but they have to be used as well. So there are many. Let me just use a very simple example. With the streaming services now, you have a distribution system often used called pro rata. Pro rata means that basically it's the amount of clicks that is piled together and it's then divided out. And this sounds like, oh, isn't this exactly what we do? Yeah, we listen, we click, and someone gets paid. But if you look at that from an individual perspective, if you, Sofie, if you pay 10 euros a month for a service and you listen just to my album, which would be great, of course, if you did, and you don't reach a level then where I actually get any money. The 10 euros deducted with some of the fees for the services will go to those highest earners, and I will get nothing. To me, it's okay, but I'm using me as an example. This is a way where we need to have a stronger link between the individual listener and the individual creator. And when you can do that through technology, through user-centric models, which is not a problem, it can already be implemented today, then you will have another incentive for listeners to what they listen, and they feel also that their money is actually going to what they're listening to. And so this is not the case now. Sometimes you get absolutely zero from what someone listens, even though they're listening to your music. So this is one example. And this is something that could be implemented right away. And this is something that we will use in the Fair Music platform as well, to show the difference. And with this kind of difference, you could say that you could actually have a sustainable income with maybe 2,000 fans instead of having needed maybe millions of clicks and still not be able to pay your rent. So it's not sustainable as it is now. And it's also a way, using blockchain technology is also a way of showing provenance. And provenance will be more and more important because we need to counter fake streams, fake artists, and this can also be done with this kind of technology. You also have very interesting products that I've seen recently with Utopia Music that we work with as well, where some of the problems why you don't get paid is because you have too many right holders claiming for that usage. And if you claim more than 100%, nothing will be paid out to anyone. So if you have a YouTube clip and you have publishers and artists and creators, and it all piles up to more than 100%, the money stays there. And there are so many examples of that. And these are tools also now available where you can use this in order to actually get the money out to where it is supposed to go. So these are very simple ways of using technology actually already existing. But you have to have an incentive of changing. You have to feel the urgency, not only of showing how much the music industry earns, but making sure that every individual gets their fair share, because that's where the diversity in music lies.
Yeah, and I hear from many how difficult they find it to be to also get the data they need to track and monitor. And you've touched upon that several times
Yes.
during the conversation. And it could be both, as we're talking about now, as a songwriter, when you create your own music, but also as a musician, when you're out working, with other organizations or producers and organizers, and they hold on to your data, where you do a lot of marketing and you drive traffic to them, and then they capture the data and you end up with nothing. I wondered, is that something you see too? Because I hear that a lot, especially now since there's so much talk about creators having to become, entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial, movement is growing and yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, if you want to succeed as an entrepreneur, which we are all about here as Arts Dynamics, you need to have the entire ecosystem. You need to have ownership. You need to have the power. You need to be able to track and measure both the customer journey and the product pathway, to speak sort of entrepreneurial lingo here. But it's really, really hard for creators to get access to that data. What do you see from your end?
I think that we will see a push from legislators. We will see legal actions, and sometimes legal actions are a good incentive once again to change, because in the music industry, you sometimes end up with music or money for the usage of music ending up in what we call a black box. That is, you're not entirely sure of how this music was used, where the money should go. And the problem is that often then you use the black box money to divide it by something called market share. This is basically, to put it simple, you divide it to the ones that everyone knows, the highest earners from the biggest publishers. And if you think, why did it end up in the black box? Why don't we know who actually should have this money? Because they're not the most famous, because it's not the majors. Once again, you have a musical diversity lying in this black box, but you're not distributing it in that way. And we will see legal actions. Actually, I already know that there's a legal process going on, and you will probably hear about it soon. I'm not entitled to say more, but this legal process will address this. And I think that when it does, others will feel the urge to change. And why is it more dangerous now than 5 years ago? Because 5 years ago, you could actually say that we would love to do this and do something about this, but we don't have technology. Now you have technology, so not adopting to it is now a choice and not something that you just because of circumstances end up with. So this is a positive thing. I'm sure we will see a development here, definitely. But we also need to push it a bit.
Yeah, it's like both. It's both from legislation point of view and from grassroots, and somewhere meet in the middle to have dialogue, right?
I always think that the grassroots level needs to inform the legislators,
Yeah.
and we need to be trustworthy. And I think we as creators and performers, we are. And we have a good relation, much stronger relation now, especially maybe on EU level, where the EU Commission supported our Fair Music platform. We have something called the Creators Friendship Group in the EU Parliament, working on safeguarding issues important to creators and performers. This was not the case when I started as chair of EXA, the European Composer and Songwriter Alliance. You could then hear from the Commission that they wanted to build their own Googles and Facebooks in Europe,
Yeah.
but then realized that the true value of EU and Europe lies in the diversity of culture and the different kinds of cultural content that we create and perform.
Yeah.
And this is why also the president of the EU Commission then, Juncker, he actually went out in his yearly speech and called us, the creators, as the EU crown jewels. I think that was a major success, I think.
I love that. And
Yes,
that's how it should be, right? It starts with the
absolutely.
creation. Everything
Well,
right follows, not the
it does.
other way around.
No, no.
Not the other way around. I had someone here speaking of AI, but we're going to move on to another topic. But I'm just going to quickly see what it says. It says university students are increasingly using AI in writing papers. Yes, we see this across all sectors, and we touched upon that before as well. You know, when people apply for funds and grants and scholarships, they also use AI to submit those applications, which makes it hard to read. There are three basic responses I see among professors: rejecting the paper outright, automatic, requiring students to cite all of their sources, or encouraging AI as a research tool, but not assigning enough weight to the paper to swing the grade. And obviously, you are not a professor and not into the writing. Having said that, you do write, you represent. So what are your thoughts on students writing with AI? I guess it would also go to lyricists and anyone working with
No, I
AI.
think absolutely. And I first of all, I think we need to realize that it will be used. So we need to find ways of making it a viable tool, and also ways of looking at how the tools are being used. That's also a skill, of course. So it's a bit, I mean, the answers lies in all of them, I would say. But there are difficulties when we talk about, from my perspective, in who owns what actually was created if it's not created by a human, and not by you, but by AI. So you, when it comes to music and copyright, and all copyright, it's very clear that what is created by AI does not hold copyright. It has to be created by a human. So you also have a danger in creating something that has at least enough amount of creation in the piece that have been created by AI, because then you could actually lose the possibility of owning it or earning something on it. This may not be as important for students, but it's definitely for professionals.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that is being worked out now. It's a matter of, so what did you do? Did you do enough as a human to actually create this, or was it the machine? And it could actually be, you could have examples where the prompt is so original and fantastic, so it actually is original enough to have ownership, even if AI created it out of your prompt, because your prompt might have been an original piece of poetry. And that is the reason why AI could do what it did. But these are things that are being discussed right now, and we haven't seen the answers yet. And this is also why it's so important for us from the creative community to be part in this work together with legislators, making sure that, as I said, it has to be legislation fit for purpose, and we don't want to stop innovation.
Yeah.
Because as creators, we're innovators ourselves. We create new content every day. So we are futurists. We are
Yeah.
innovators as well. So we need to work together, on this.
For sure, for sure. And also there is not one AI. I mean, one AI tool can give you one answer and then another AI tool gives you another. We just had a fascinating, thank you so much for your response on that, the person said. I mean, we're creating our own AI bot here now with Arts Dynamics, which will be able to answer questions 24/7 based on all the material that we have. That's pretty fascinating, amazing, and scary at the same time, because you can obviously create now AI bots and create avatars of yourself, hyper realistic avatars and digital twins and all of that, that personify you, and you as an artist, as a creator, and can also speak with your audience, with your fan base, which leads to the next question: how do you then know that you're actually talking to the person that you think you're talking to? And that in turn leads to, we are talking a lot about the technical aspects here, the AI and the tools. But I wonder, Alfons, are we sometimes missing the bigger question, which is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be artist? How do we make sure that artists are relevant as we move into the new age of, AI is here, robotics are on their way. We are, going into space. You and I both share a big space interest. So, I want to build a cultural center on Mars, but who are we as artists, as humans?
Well, I think that question is probably even
Yeah,
too big for me. But it's fascinating. Just having
yeah,
these thoughts are absolutely fascinating.
yeah.
And but it, in a way, it doesn't really scare me. It reassures me of what we do as individuals, creators. It's something that is not so easily copied, because you, at least I feel that with the compositions that I make, they are not made out of what is possible or most likely to create next time. It's the contrary. So I like to go against all rules, and hopefully that can be the savior in this. But I think that um, I think that we probably need to look at AI on different levels. Once again, when it comes to the rights that you have, that is something that if we lose that part, then we've probably lost the possibility of collaboration, because collaboration will come out of the fact that we have something that AI needs, and if we lose the upper hand on that, then I think then it would be a downward spiral. But I'm optimistic.
Yeah, that's good. So the human edge, everyone, please remember to hang on to the human edge and what makes us special as humans. Obviously, there are things that are really unique for us as humans that AI cannot replicate. And speaking of humanity, and speaking of us as a species, and like the bigger framework, you are working with Global Music Vault. When I heard about this the first time, I was blown away by the fact that this is happening. You are creating this. Can you please explain a little bit more for the listeners and the people who are here live? What is Global Music Vault? What are you doing, and what are you safeguarding?
Yeah, it could be something with the ice bears and Svalbard, which is also is, because
Yeah.
it's about where you have the seed vault and the possibilities of archiving music just as a neighbor to that seed vault. But that's not the main thing here. The main thing is that we tend not to look at digital as something that is a kind of when it comes to climate change and green energy, we think about our cars, we think about the flights that we take, but we don't think about the amount of songs being uploaded to Spotify every day, and with AI that will increase with hundreds of thousands of songs every day. And we should remember the fact that we compose as human. AI does not compose, AI calculates. And when AI calculates, it all costs in energy. And all of these songs need to be they need to be archived somewhere. You need to store them somewhere. And this is why we, together with the Global Music Vault, had been looking together with Microsoft also and their innovation teams, looking at new formats. How can we save music in a way that does not destroy our climate and our earth? And we have such fantastic examples now of possibilities to save your music on a piece of glass, and the glass will hold for 10,000 years, and it does not consume the same time. It doesn't. You're not connected to energy sources in the same way as you have your old computers. We all have old computers and hard drives, even though we call it the cloud. The cloud is just a bunch of old computers anyway. So we need to move forward also in this kind of thinking. When we talk about sustainability, it's about fair remuneration, possibilities for creators to continuously create, but we need to have new formats and new technology also when it comes to make a sustainable option when it comes to creating music digitally. So this is what we do, and we are now we are developing this with Microsoft, and I think it blows me away when we see it. When we test these things, this is the future. So, but you can hold on to your computers a bit more, because they will break within 5 years anyway. So you don't need to do anything actively. They will make sure.
Yeah, it leads to two questions. One, you mentioned the cassette, that many people here might not even know what that is. That is just a few years ago, I
Yeah.
say, turning 50 soon. But looking into the future, and you're talking about glass, how will we make sure that people 10,000 years ahead of time will know how to read that piece of glass if we cannot even listen to CDs and cassettes during our own lifetime?
That's a good question, and I think we need to have. I think we have a clearer view on things not being forever. So I think that it goes without saying that we also create ways of moving from one format to another. We need to have this kind of information. When it all started, we never thought things would change. This is probably why you weren't really ready to also make sure that the knowledge about the formats could be read. But I guess we have a solution to all of that. We'll just ask AI to make sure they have a solution for us in having this information moving forward from generation to generation. What do you say? Should we trust it?
I think we should ask several AIs to see what answers they come up with on different sides of the spectrum, and maybe from that source something. That's an interesting take.
But it's a smart question, because this has to be part of also not only creating systems. You need to be able to transform and transit from one to another in a much more organized way than we have done before. Business-wise, I'm not sure that it has been so bad from some companies, because we all bought cassettes, then we bought next format and next format of the same album. So that was probably a good business for some, but I don't think that's sustainable. No.
Yeah, it's like Apple changing power cords all the time, even though that is being regulated right now in EU. But so the second question is, and I've had this, so I'm just passing it on to you, and that is, music creators who feel like, but I want to be part of that legacy. I want my music to live on for 10,000 years. How can I make sure that, how can I get on board? So I guess it's like 2A, how can they get on board if they want to safeguard their music or, keep it for future generations? But also, how do you actually make a decision who makes it and who doesn't? Since the old saying, the winners decide on, create history. So who are being selected to be part of this, this vault?
Well, obviously, not everyone can be selected at first from day one, but we are doing the same way here as I said we are trying to do with the Fair Music Project, and it's about decentralization. It's not a jury talking about who should be on this glass. So we use the IMC, the International Music Council. I used to be president there, and It's an organization and a network with almost 600 million members around the world, and it has national councils and regional councils. So it's the knowledge existing in a region that works on this, not a centralized person or jury or committee or board deciding. So it's the knowledge where you are, but this is also something that needs to take off more on a larger scale, because right now we are working on improving the format and making sure that this also becomes something that can be used on a larger scale. And this, of course, needs to be. We need to make sure that all parties in this are giving their okay, which
Yeah.
I'm certain will happen.
Yeah, it sounds like a fascinating project for
It
sure.
is. It's fantastic.
And I'm thinking also with climate change and with things changing also from not only from an environmental perspective, but also, I mean, geographically, location-wise, it changes. So where would you store it? How would you store it? How do you make sure it's not underwater in 10,000 years? I think yeah.
That's true, and this is why I said that Svalbard may not be the ultimate solution, but if you have a format that is durable for 10,000 years and does not consume energy in the way that old formats have, then you can have copies. Then you can have your glass in different parts of the world. Now the difficulty is, and the challenge is that you have them all over the place. You have at least 15, average, I think 15, 20 copies of a master file. And if you have that and upload around 130 or 140 to Spotify each day, you can imagine how many files are stored in consuming energy. So I think that the solution will not be having it in one safe place. You can have them in several, if it does not consume the same kind of energy. And this is what the glass is giving a solution to.
Yeah.
It looks very good. I mean, I grew up with the Superman film where he's holding these kind of, the glasses with all the knowledge in. So to me, I was like, I felt we're getting there.
I love the direction of this conversation, and we are about to wrap up. And I just have a few more things. And speaking of Superman, speaking of the future, speaking of glass, I remember you and I had a conversation, and again, 10,000 years ahead in time. You and I had a conversation once because, the mission behind Arts Dynamics, what I'm passionate about, is to empower 1 million arts entrepreneurs by 2030 and to bring artists to space. That vision came to me many years ago. I'm now a member of Ugly Space Center. It's sort of, we're getting closer to that. And I actually had someone reach out recently to ask if I could recommend artists who wanted to bring their art to the moon. So it's not just, wishful thinking, it's actually happening. And with what you are mentioning now with this vault and 10,000 years, I mean, we are already seeing commercial space flights. We're already seeing artists, planning to go into space. And in 10,000 years ahead of time, surely we must be living on Mars, or at least have some sort of a base there or somewhere else as an interplanetary species, which also Elon Musk talks about. I would just love to say, or have you ever thought about that from your perspective? Because I remember I asked you about music rights, and you said you actually, many years ago as a composer, you had signed a contract where they actually already signed your rights in space as well. So I just would love your take on that one.
Well, it is true. So to me, it's contract-wise, I already had it as I think I was 18 when I wrote my first contract with BBC, and they had the rights in every solar system not yet discovered and all formats not yet invented. So you could say that it was pretty tough. But I guess that Mars now for us is of course, it's a huge, it's such a big thing to think about. But when I look back in history, I think we've done these leaps before. I guess that the leap, you asked me before, where did I come from? How did I become who I am? And it's part of knowing your history. And with my grandfather, Alfons Karabuda, he was part of all of his brothers and sisters, and no one basically knew how to read and write, because they were very poor here in Sweden back then, and worked in the woods. And he became a very, acknowledged book publisher, and also a writer as one. And I think that was probably as far as for us to put something on the moon or Mars. So I think this is. I think we're doing the leaps as they always have been done. And sometimes, even though we look forward, we need to respect the history and know a bit more of our history in order to be able to steer it in the right way. I don't think we should. I think we should have respect also for the decisions having been taken by our colleagues before, and the development that took us here. And I think that's a very important part in looking at the future.
Yeah, I agree. So where do you see yourself, let's say 5-10 years ahead of time? And what can we do to support you?
I'll be sitting in the boardroom in Mars. So I will waiting for. They probably need a board and an organization. Yeah, don't you think?
Totally.
Yeah. So I'll put myself up for that.
Great. Noted.
No, I think that I will be. I'll be trying to do what I can to contribute not only to my own situation, but to music and culture as a whole. And I think that when I see so many of my colleagues doing the same thing, that gives me a lot of positive sense of where we are going. I think that there's a higher level of knowledge and competence also within our cultural sphere, where we are going to be able to manage with the future challenges in a better way than we have done before. So I think that those taking our roles after us, and when I leave now soon also from SCOP, I think we will see improvements. We will see the new generations giving us solutions that we never thought about, and hopefully they'll look back and say that, well, these old guys, maybe they did a few things taking us here and making it possible. That would be nice.
That would be very nice. And is there anything, Alfons, that I haven't asked you that you would love to share, or just talk about?
No, I think it's been great talking to you. And we could probably talk about things for another hour, because there are several topics that we haven't even had time to talk about. But I think that this has been very inspiring to me as well, because sometimes you just tend to work and you don't really think about these things. So I feel that we all need to get on board in our technical and innovation process moving forward, and be the ones who are actually contributing in making it fit for purpose. That, I think, is the most important thing, and not just reacting afterwards and saying that this wasn't any good. We need to actively involve ourselves and make sure that others, part of this innovation process, also knows that we are there and that we can contribute to an added value for everyone.
Yeah, well said. Is there anyone that you feel we should invite to this podcast series? Any guest that you would recommend? A dream guest, perhaps?
Well, there are so many. I have in the musical sphere, if I would stay in the musical sphere, I've had the fortune of talking to many of my colleagues who have been recipients of the Polar Music Prize, because I'm chair of the award committee of the Polar Music Prize. So I would probably just say that you could pick anyone from the list of the laureates, because they are so curious, talented, and not with prejudice. So having any one of those, just as an example, when we talk technology, when I had a talk and I was sitting with Björk, talking with her, and obviously she loves technology, and she had this crazy instrument, and she was just so open-minded, because this instrument existed in two. You only had two of them in the world. And she said, so I have this one. And then she looked at me, oh, maybe you have the other one. And I think that was so brilliant, just thinking that, well, why not? Maybe you have the other one. And just to make sure. And I think that kind of says it all with someone like Björk. So why not invite Björk?
Yeah, Björk, wonderful. It's a wonderful suggestion. I love that. And to hear what the other instrument is and where it is. Or maybe you do have it, Alfons, or maybe you just haven't told us.
No, I don't have it yet.
Okay, so if people want to find out more about you, which I'm sure they do after today, where do they find more information?
I have an old-fashioned thing I called a web page. So you can always look into that. I'm also on social media, so you can always have a look at Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. But I have my web page is alfonskarabuda.com. So if you want to find something there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we will post the link to your website. And if you've got any other social media platforms you would like for us to share, I'd be happy to do that too. So Alfons, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation. As always, so fun to talk about both what was, what is, and what it will be in the future. But also as we've noticed here today, we can also talk about Earth and space. And as you said, we have barely touched the surface of all the things we could discuss.
Absolutely. I had a list of things that we didn't talk of anything on my list, actually. So I think this was brilliant. Thank you very much, Sofie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And after today, for those of you listening, we would be so grateful if you could help us spread the word today, spread this podcast, this live stream, click a like, comment, what was your biggest takeaway? We don't use sponsors for a reason, want to make sure that we can speak openly about anything we want, but we're just so grateful for your help to spread the word about this podcast and to also showcase our wonderful guests that we're having. Today, we're also launching an online community in addition to our virtual home. We have Epicenter Stockholm in Stockholm where we host our meetups, and we are having meetups in other cities. We've had them in Gothenburg. I'm on my way to Athens where we will have a meetup. So anyone out there in Greece and want to join us in Athens, reach out. Going to Melbourne and to London as well for our meetups. But also, as I mentioned, we are just about to launch an online community for anybody to join from wherever you are in the world to be able to continue the conversations. Even after today and this talk with Alfons, might be things you want to discuss, then we can do that in there. So artsdynamics.com is our website. Give Alfons some love as well after today. And again, thank you all so much, Alfons. Thank you. And see you all next week again for the next episode with a new guest. And I will release it later. Over and out.
Thank you. Bye-bye.